10 years average growth of the GDP per capita.
ให้เห็นรูปที่จอเลยนะคะ
And for example, this one shows the Chinese case. So 70s, 80s, 90s, and year 2000. This means that in the 70s, China's GDP per capita is almost around 200 or something. And at the time, Chinese per capita GDP growth rate, 10 years average, is around 6%. And then Chinese income is going up 10 years by 10 years. And the year 2000, maybe Chinese GDP per capita reached to the around 30,000, 3,000, 4,000. And yearly growth rate of the per capita income is around maybe 8 to 9%, very high. And this group is this Japan and Singapore and Korea, all Northeast Asian countries. So basically, including China, Northeast Asian country has a very high path of economic growth. And here's the Latin American countries. They are typical middle-income trap countries. In case of Latin American countries, they are all in middle-income stage. But in 10 years average, some countries recorded a negative growth 14 years. And at the maximum, their 10 years average growth rate is maybe 2 to 3%. So some call this group of Latin American countries is trapped in the middle income trap. And how about the Southeast Asian countries? This is Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and also Philippines. Philippines is a little bit an exception because in 10 years average, they have the negative growth. In maybe 80s and 90s. And this one maybe Indonesia, and Thailand, and Malaysia. So in case of Southeast Asian countries, they are in the middle income stage. And also the growth rate is middle. So, and even though their income is going up, the growth rate is not dramatically reduced. They are very stable here. But compared with at the same income stage, so maybe this one's Korea. In 70s, the Korea's GDP per capita is maybe around 5,000 or so. At the time, Korea's growth rate is maybe 8%. But in case of the Thailand, maybe 80s or 90s. So in 90s, Thailand's GDP per capita is the same as the 70s Korean income level. But at the same income level, Thailand growth rate is a little bit less than 5%. So there's a difference in maybe 3 to 4% compared with the same income level. So you can see that compared with Northeast Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries have significantly low per capita growth, maybe 3 to 4%. Even though compared with Latin America, it's much better, but the difference is there between the Northeast Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries. So both regions have recorded very high average economic growth for last half a century, and both regions are part of international production network, and both regions follow some kind of triangle pattern of economic development. But the growth rate of GDP per capita in Southeast Asia is almost 3 to 4% lower than that of Northeast Asian countries at the same income level. And now there's a fear of the middle income trap for Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia and Thailand. So what are the differences between these two regions? That is a research question for us. And there's a lot of different definition of the middle income trap. This is a descriptive one. Middle income countries are unable to compete with low income, low wage economies in manufacturing, export, and unable to compete with advanced economies in high skill innovations. And then there's some. Thank you. Right. And this one is a definition by Ike Green. You can read it later. And also the famous definition by Felipe. But skip here. But some people say that there's no such kind of thing like a middle income trap, like Rosenblatt, and also myself, and also Herman Ray, and some people are very skeptical to the existence of the middle income trap. So there's no standard view to the middle income trap at this moment. But in Asia, many of the researchers think that there's some kind of the middle income trap, and the cause of this middle income trap is a failure of industrial upgrading. Also, they observed that many ASEAN countries and said there's some glass ceiling between in his initial two stages. One stage, stage two is in which number of local or small SME exist, but through they need foreign guidance to produce some goods. And one step up, stage three, where local firms have mastered management and technology to successfully produce high quality products. He said just got glass ceiling between here, and some countries are remaining in this stage 2 and cannot go to the stage 3, and he called this the one reason of the middle income trap. And also other research here on Penang also, Nabeshima-san also Yusuf-san said in the middle income trap because industrial linkage is very weak and no or R&D is also not enough. Okay, so there are various definitions of middle income trap, and for some definition, some countries fall in this trap, and the other definition they are not. So it depends on the definition. And just various causes of the myth that are institution, population dynamics, infrastructure, macroeconomic situation, policy, economic structure. But for East Asia, Southeast Asia, the main argument of the middle income trap is concentrated around a failure of industrial upgrading. So how we can analyze the industrial upgrading, or how numerically possibly we grab situation of industrial upgrading? For me, we see it from the trade structure. There's three types of the industrial upgrading. One is within product, and another is within industry. A third one is between industry. And within product upgrading is pretty easy. If you produce a car, exporting a car of the price of the $10,000, then you can produce and export a car $3,000, $30,000. It's upgrading within the same product, same car. So it's a within product upgrading. But it's not very easy to analyze this within product upgrading, because in trade data, just not all trade data has price information. So this time we see these two. within industry and between industry upgrading. What is a within industry? Is if you producing in electronics industry, first you produce some kind of very simple electronics parts like a condenser or resistor. Then step to the further to the semiconductor, and within the semiconductor, first producing the memory, then the CPU. That kind of the upgrading in the same industry, we call it as within industry upgrading. And between industries are much easier. First they producing the primary commodities, then upgrading to the textile, then electronics, then to the automotive, and so on. This kind of the shifting to the different, more sophisticated industry we call the between industry upgrading. And so how to measure this kind of the upgrading or sophistication of the goods? Largely used index is PRODI or expert. First, a little bit explain about PRODI. PRODI is is the average GDP of exporters' GDP. So if you think about the car, if Germany is exporting the 50% of the world car, and Germany's GDP per capita is maybe 50,000, and less of the 50% car is exported from Japan, and maybe Japan's GDP per capita is 40,000. In that case, we weighted average of the Japan and Germany's per capita GDP is 45,000 US dollars. So in that case, PRODI of the car is 45,000. So the PRODI shows higher PRODI shows higher sophistication, or that goods is exported by the advanced economies. On the other hand, maybe for the government, China exporting the half of the world government, and China GDP is 5,000, and Cambodia is exporting less of the 50% of the government, and per capita income is 1,000. In that case, the PRODI of the government is around 3,000. So automotive 45,000, government 3,000. In this like this, PRODI shows the sophistication of the goods. And the one is the expert. Expert is weighted average of the PRODI for one country. So if the Japan exporting the 80% of the car and 20% of the government, we weighted average, calculate weighted average. So the car's PRODI is 45,000, and the government is 2,000. Maybe weighted average of export for Japan is around 38,000 something. But if for Cambodia, there's no exporting automotive industry and just exporting government industry, so government industry's PRODI is 3,000. Export for Cambodia is just 3,000. So the export shows weighted average of the PRODI, so the sophistication of the overall sophistication of the exported goods for a specific country. So a little bit, sorry. First I will explain. I forgot to interpret it, but basically the higher PRODI goods is some kind of the special kind of the steel, maybe only produced in EU, and very low PRODI goods is very simple. This means gold or sheep or uranium or cobalt, or some beans, or such kind of the primary commodity has a very low PRODI, so less sophisticated goods. Sorry, but this one is low PRODI. And what country has a higher sophisticated export structure? high produce export countries like this, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Ireland, Singapore, Japan. And lower one is Nigeria, Nicaragua, Uganda, Benin, and Tanzania. This country has a less sophisticated export structure. And this one is our research content. This one shows the changes in the export, so the degree of sophistication of export for selected Asian countries for during late 90s to year 2006, 2016. So in case within the 8 year, Japan has a consistently high export. So Japan exporting the most, in average, most sophisticated goods, but not going up, just stable and a little bit declining. And this shows the export for Indonesia, always low. And this one's Korea, steadily increasing for the last 15 years. And this one shows that China. China's produce from 19,000 to 22,000, so increasing a lot. And this one, Malaysia, very stagnant, and formerly very near to the Korea, but now under China. And this one, Thailand, not very stagnant compared with Malaysia, but not that increasing compared with China. And this graph is a different aspect. The same thing, but we set the year 2100. So the Chinese product increasing a lot, and Malaysia and Indonesia is stagnant, and Thailand and Korea is in between. Okay, but it's not very easy to analyze why this Chinese produce is increasing, why Malaysian produce is very stagnant. So we want to decompose the factors. The produce is calculated based on a 6-digit HS code. So 5,000 goods is under this one index. So we first aggregate the produce into this, for these 5 goods, capital goods like industrial machines or commercial vehicle, parts and components like a semiconductor, and consumption goods like food, passenger cars, electronic appliances, garment, and primary commodities, cereals, food oil, rubber, and so on. And processed goods, so palm oil, chemical products, and petrol products, and cement, and so on, steel, and iron steel, and so on. And this one, the semi-aggregated produce for these countries for year 2000. And you can see that for the primary commodities, it's regardless of the country. Thailand is a little bit lower produce, but almost all the countries, the produce of primary commodities is around 15,000. So less sophisticated. And the most sophisticated one is the capital goods. Most of the companies, the produce for the capital goods is more than 20,000. And interest one is consumption goods. In terms of consumption goods, Indonesia's produce in consumption goods is almost the same as primary commodities. So even they are producing the consumption goods and exporting, but their level of sophistication is not very different from the primary commodities. But in case of Japan here, the in categories in the consumption goods, but the product is around 25,000. This is almost the same as the capital goods. So within the consumption goods, Japan's export is very sophisticated and matched to the capital goods. So there's very large variation in the consumption goods. So within industry sophistication and between industry sophistication, if one country's export is shifting from the primary commodity to consumption to capital goods, then the average product is increasing. We call this changes in composition of the industry in export. We call shift in this direction. We call within industry upgrading. And between industry. And if one country is exporting consumption goods, it's upgrading like this. So probably of the one consumption goods is growing to 50,000 to 25,000. We call this kind of upgrade within the same category of the goods. We call this within upgrading. So between upgrading and within upgrading. And this one shows in case of China. China, this is year by year Chinese products increasing every year. And we decompose it within and between. Basically, in case of China, between industry upgrading here, but after the later half of the year 2000, within industry upgrading is larger than the between industry upgrading. But basically, the both upgrading happening. And this is within upgrading for China, except for the primary commodities. Most of the goods, the products increasing, especially the this one, the processed goods, and also capital goods. There are sophistication within each product category is increasing. And this one, the between upgrading for China. But in case of China, the share of the consumption goods is declining compared with the end of the 90s. But in spite of, instead of that, the capital goods and the parts and the components share is very much increasing. So compared with the 90s and now, the Chinese share, export share in consumption goods is almost 20% lower compared with 20 years ago. But the share of the capital goods and the parts and the components is maybe 5 to 10% higher. So this kind of shift in export structure happening in Chinese export. And what happened in Thailand? In case of Thailand, end of the 90s to the mid 2000, within industry upgrading is happening. And little bit degrading here, but after that, again, there's some within and between industry upgrading. But there's very little between upgrading. So, in case of Thailand, except for these goods or processed goods, most of the goods level of sophistication is going up. Especially the red one is consumption goods, and also this one may be really difficult to, but this one capital goods. The level of sophistication is going up. And comparing this between upgrading with Thailand, compare with the first 2000, share of the processed goods increasing, and also this one's capital goods increasing, and also primary commodities a little bit increasing, almost zero. But the share of the consumption goods decreasing, and also share of the parts decreasing. So if share of parts increasing and also capital goods increasing, and primary commodity decreasing and the consumption goods decreasing, it's a pattern of China. So industrial upgrading quite smooth. Not this one is not very bad, but not like ideal industrial upgrading. And this one is a bad one is for the Indonesia. For Indonesia, this time both the between and within upgrading is very smooth, but after that the between upgrading is negative around here. So what is happening? Always within upgrading is not very bad. Level of sophistication is going up, but in case of the Indonesia, the share of the consumption goods, red one is declining around 10% compared with 1998. On the other hand, yellow one, the export share of the primary commodity is going up. So industrial structure is degrading from consumption goods to primary commodities. If the like China, consumption goods share is declining while the parts and the components of capital goods export is increasing, that's okay. But the consumption goods is declining while primary commodities increasing. This is a degrading downgrading of the industrial structure. So conclusion, so lower growth rate for Southeast Asia, and we use the word resource class type of the sophistication of export goods. So consumption goods to primary commodity, or consumption goods to processed goods like palm oil or some chemical products. Happening for mainly Malaysia and Indonesia. And for Thailand, export share of processed goods is increasing in exchange for the consumption goods. Not very bad, but if not processed goods, but the parts and components and capital goods is increasing, it's ideal. And it's not possible to trust industrial upgrading only from the trade data. So next part, Dr. Kuroiwa will explain about it. And for the last one is this graph. This graph shows relationship or correlation between the net to export ratio. Net export ratio means that if the country is exporting a goods positive, importing a goods negative, and exporting and importing is balanced, then that's zero. That's the net export ratio. We take this correlation of the net export ratio between these 5 categories of goods. So consumption goods, capital goods and parts, and processed goods, and primary commodities. And this means if one country is exporting the consumption goods, then the country is highly likely also exporting the capital goods and primary parts, because the correlation is highly positive. And also, one country is exporting the capital goods and parts. This country also highly likely to exporting the processed goods, because here relationship is quite high. So this shows the industrialization through the backward linkage. So first, the country start from consumption goods, then they start producing the parts and components for that goods, and also produce the materials used in that parts and components. This kind of backward, the industrialization through the backward linkage seems to be very consistent with this trade structure analysis. But in case of the country starting from the primary commodities, then the correlationship between the primary commodity to the processed goods is almost neutral. So this country exporting the maybe oil can produce also the chemical product used oil, natural gas or crude oil. But this country want to proceed more using this kind of processed goods, so like plastic. Then they want to proceed to the making some parts and components for the automotive sector. It's not very easy because the exporter of the primary commodities is very less likely to also export out capital goods or parts and components because he has large negative correlations. And also here the primary commodities and the consumption goods, there's largely negative correlation. So exporter of the primary commodities is very less likely to at the same time export the capital goods parts and consumption goods. So the industrialization through the forward linkage, so starting from primary commodities to the processed goods used these primary commodities, it's okay, but it's very hard to proceed furthermore to capital goods parts or consumption goods. So the backward linkage is better way for the industrial upgrading. Forward linkage from the primary commodity is not very easy to go through here to other category of the industrial goods. Okay, this is my part of the presentation. I pass to the Dr. Kuroiwa.
There are several causes for one is diminishing returns to fiscal capital. I think we were about this already. And the second one is very important: exhaustions of cheap labors and inflation base. Because of the merit of low income level, and the developing countries initially can grow very rapidly, utilizing the advantage of cheap labor and inflation base. But once they develop and reach a certain income level, these opportunities are lost, and they have to develop their technology by themselves. Then growth will slow down. The third one is insufficient quality of human capital. So many middle-income countries have a problem with the quality of human capital. Not the quantities, but the quality is important for overcoming the middle-income countries. Then distorted incentives and the misallocation of talent. Every country has a talented people, but if there is a distortions in the incentives, the talented students they choose go to business school instead of engineering school, and their talent cannot be used for developing the new technologies. Instead of that, they will work for the property, industrial, banking sectors, etc. So maybe this one is very important. Also in Thailand, right? The number of students who go to the engineering school is relatively small in Thailand. Right? I think this one is also important in Thailand. And lack of access to advanced infrastructures. This one is very important. Of course, you need to have a very advanced infrastructures, physical infrastructures for R&D activities. But here, something like the human networks, what we call the knowledge networks is very important. To develop new technologies, you have to have a good access to the talented peoples overseas. So you have to use a links with overseas engineers and scientists. So this kind of network is a part of the advanced infrastructures. And also lack of access to finance. For developing new technologies, you cannot have a collateral. For physical infrastructures, for developing the physical infrastructures, you can have the collateral. For example, you can have land or infrastructure facility as a collateral, so that bank cannot finance it easily. But for the developing new technologies, you cannot have such a collateral. Maybe the human brain can be a kind of collateral, but it's very difficult to assess the qualities of the new ideas. So this one is also very crucial factors. And also income inequalities. If you have very significant income inequalities, there's some talented people cannot go to the universities. Right? So the income inequality also affects the development of technologies. The talented people lose opportunities if they come from poor families. Right? So these factors affect. And also maybe I guess Thailand, Malaysia also have this kind of problem. And then I like to look at some evidence of R&D study and the number of researchers in these Asians. Okay, Korea has the largest R&D spending as a share of GDP, 4.3%. This is highest in the world. And the number of they also have a great number of researchers, exceeding 6,000 students, 6,000 researchers per 1 million populations. And Japan, the second. China is not a high-income country, but still China has relatively high R&D spending shares. And Singapore also has a higher R&D spending shares compared with other Southeast Asian countries. Malaysia, 1.3%. Thailand, 0.5. 0.5. I think this is too low to overcome the trap. And the number of the researchers is less than 1,000. And then, what about other Southeast Asian countries, less developed Southeast Asian countries? The share of R&D spending is less than 0.5%. And the number of the researchers, less than 500. So it's very difficult for them to overcome the development trap. Right? So they have to do something. They have to address this constraint. This slide shows a relationship between export structures and economic growth. These are the famous, well-known literatures which shows the relationship between export structures and economic performance. For instance, let's say different export structures have different implications for growth. Technology-intensive structures offer better prospects for future growth because their product tends to grow faster in trade. Sophisticated product or technology-intensive product, such as high-tech product, are good for economic growth because those countries which are specialized in the high-tech product, technology-intensive product, tend to have higher growth than other countries. So, this one, the Hausman and others show that countries with initially high levels of export, you already know about export, right? They produce highly sophisticated products. They subsequently experience a higher economic growth rate. So to enjoy higher economic growth, you have to specialize in the more sophisticated product, more high-tech product. And also this one, that also say that export structures are path-dependent and difficult to change. Once you specialize in the low-tech product, low unsophisticated product, it's very difficult for you to shift to high-tech product or more sophisticated product. And the next, Hausner and Greener said, countries specialized in a dense part of the product space have an easy time at changing the revealed comparative advantage than countries that are specialized in more dispersed connected product. And maybe, I think some of you already know about the concept of product space. You know already about that? Product space. Maybe I don't put that in time. This one. And this one is important for the middle-income countries. The countries that have attained upper middle income or high income have in general more diversified, sophisticated, and non-standard exports. He's an economist at ADB, and he found that, he and his colleagues found that those countries who overcome middle income trap have more diversified, sophisticated, and non-standard exports. So the conclusion is greater sophistication and diversification of exports are necessary for sustainable economic growth and escaping from the middle income trap. And here we focus on China. As Madam-san's presentation showed, China has a very sophisticated export structures compared with its GDP per capita. For instance, China has exported a wide range of highly sophisticated products, and its export value is similar to that of a country with a per capita income 3 times higher than China. Right? China has very sophisticated export structures. For instance, China is famous for exporting a lot of the iPhone to the US. Very high tech. So that's the problem with China. There are counter arguments by some economists on this finding. They say that China, so this is the study in early 90, early 20, in early 2000. And at that time, many economists still don't believe that China technological level is, many economists don't believe that China technological level is very high, right? Maybe China is producing and exporting a lot of high-tech goods, but most of input come from other countries, including Japan, China, Korea. So the high-tech export product is just a reflection of high-tech imported goods from neighboring countries. So China is just, assembling using a cheap labor and export to the US. So it doesn't reflect China's technical capabilities. Right? Exporting high-tech goods doesn't reflect China's technological capabilities. So because of these arguments, we decided to use value-added export instead of export. For export, we use a trade data, but value-added export for value-added export we use input outputs. I think let me explain. Okay, so please remember, to measure the technological content of domestic activities, we use value-added export instead of export. Let me explain. This is the case of Malaysia. Say Japan is exporting input goods, intermediate goods to Malaysia, like 80 intermediate input to Malaysia, and then Malaysia using input imported from Japan, Malaysia export 100 units of consumption goods, high-tech consumption goods to the US. If we use trade data, Japanese export to Malaysia, is 80. Japan export nothing to the USA, and Malaysia to the USA 100, right? But trading value-added, we focus on value-added, which is generated in this production process. Right? Japan GDP is generated 80 value-added, 80 unit value-added is generated in Japan. So in value-added term, Japan export 80 value-added to the USA. Malaysia 20. Japan, Malaysia, nothing. Right? So if we use trading value-added, we can avoid the overestimation of Malaysia's high-tech export. Right? Malaysia's export to the USA declined from 100 to just 20. Right? So this is the ideal trading. Then look at the results. Okay, this is the 1990s. So in the 1990s, actually Singapore, Malaysia had a very high-tech export shares. Malaysia 26, Singapore 35, and it's higher than Japan. Japan's high-tech share is only 24%, because Japan's major export product is automobile. Automobile is classified as a high middle high tech product. High middle tech product. So anyway, in terms of the share of high tech product, Malaysia and Singapore have already had higher high tech shares than Japan. And Indonesia, and Thailand. Indonesia has high export share in primary product. Thailand, low tech product in 1990. Then we look at the slide for 2005. China increased share of high-tech export very drastically, 29.2%. However, when evaluated times, high-tech export declined significantly, 39.2 to 9.7, almost 1/3. Because China imports a lot of intermediate goods to export high-tech products to the developed country. So in various terms, the share of export declined very drastically. But Japan, look at Japan. Because Japan has a very strong supplier base. Japan does not depend very much on the imported inputs. So Japan declined. Japan also, the share of high-tech export in Japan also declined. But compared with China, the decline is smaller. Because Japan procure input from the domestic market. Also, if you look at the other countries in Southeast Asia, the share of high-tech declined drastically. In Thailand, the share of export of high-tech products is 23.5. Then it declined to 9.0. Right? So other Southeast Asian countries also there is significant gap between the export share and foreign export share. And previous share by agriculture. Okay. So if you compare the meaning of previous share is foreign content of export. Okay. If you export some product, you need to import input from other countries. Then value added is generated in other countries. Right? So if you are highly dependent on input, the share of foreign content of export, the share of GDP, their share of value added generated abroad becomes greater, right? So we share indicate the dependency on imported in terms of the value added. Then the Southeast Asian countries have, on average, have higher VS share than Northeast Asian countries. Okay, Indonesia is an exception, but in VS share of high-tech product in Southeast Asia exceeds 50%. Northeast Asia, maybe Taiwan has higher share, but Japan only 8.8%. And China 21.5. Yeah. But compared with Northeast Asia, Southeast Asian countries are highly dependent on imported input, especially in high-tech products. For low-tech products, there are lower US shares, lower dependency on imported input. Okay, so this is the demand from 2005. Compared with 1990 90s, all the figures increased because of the progress of fragmentation of production. Because of the vertical trade increased, the share of US foreign content in export increased in all the countries except Indonesia. Okay, this one shows the decomposition of US share of semiconductor product. This is domestic content share, foreign content by product, foreign content by country. In Southeast Asia, semiconductor is high-tech product, very high-tech product. Southeast Asian countries like Thailand and Malaysia have high foreign content share. In other words, domestic content share is relatively small compared to Northeast Asia, because they need to import a lot of input from abroad to produce semiconductors. And if you look at the foreign content by country, also, Japan has the highest shares. It means that they depend on Japan very much for high-tech product, for high-tech engineering input. And next, they depend on China. Right? And the dependency on Northeast Asia is higher than Southeast Asia. China, Thailand and Malaysia, compared with China and Korea, they have higher dependency on Southeast Asian countries, but they are still dependent more on Northeast Asia than Southeast Asia for inputs or imported inputs. Okay. Then let's see the last slide. This one shows the VS and VS1 share. VS1 share is a little bit difficult to explain, but for example, if you produce input and export to other countries, then in that countries they using these input, they assemble or process and export to other countries. The export. Then your country, in your country, GDP, value added is generated in your country. Right? So if you have higher VS1 share, such a, you have higher exported input that is used in other countries for the export. Right? So if your country is located in the upstream of the value chains, you have higher VS1 share. Right? On the other hand, if you have located in the downstream of the value chains, you need to buy a lot of input from other countries because you have higher VS share. Right? Higher VS1 share indicate you are in the upstream country. Higher VS share indicate you are a downstream country. Right? So comparing a VS and VS1, Japan have a very high VS1 share. Because Japan is exporting a lot of input to East Asian countries. So Japan is located in upstream in the East Asian value chains. On the other hand, these countries, including Southeast Asian countries, they have higher VS share, meaning that they are located downstream in the value chain. So compared with 1995 and 2011, we can say that Northeast, Southeast Asian countries continue to have higher VS, but their VS1 didn't increase so much. On the other hand, in Northeast Asia, they still have high VS. But at the same time, their VS1 increased significantly. It means that Northeast Asian countries, they used to import a lot of people from other countries. But now the situation changed. They start exporting people to other countries. But in South Asia, such a change cannot be seen in Southeast Asia. So our conclusion is upgrading and diversification in export production is essential for economic growth. Southeast Asian economies, with the exception of Indonesia, have shown a significant increase in the level of sophistication export. However, when evaluated in variable terms, which indicates the contribution of private inputs to manufacturing activity, the share of high-tech export declined significantly. The share of high-tech export in variable terms declined significantly because of high dependency on import inputs in South Asia. In South Asia, high-tech industries are led by multinationals. In the industries led by multinationals, many R&D activities are conducted abroad, so that the knowledge and experience are not accumulated within the countries. Moreover, it is not easy to switch to local procurement due to the existence of well-established international supply chains. Thus, these industries continue to have high dependency on imported inputs. This is our hypothesis. Most East Asian countries have increased dependency on imported inputs, but simultaneously they have strengthened their position as a supplier of intermediate inputs in the value chains. Such a change in export structure is consistent with a process of upgrading in the primary paradigm of economic development in East Asia. Southeast Asian countries continue to have high dependency on imported inputs. On the other hand, they have failed in strengthening their position as a supplier of intermediate inputs. The upgrading in export structure that is consistent with the primary paradigm cannot be observed yet in Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think both papers try to discuss about the Asian country, Northeast and Southeast Asia. The first paper is discussing about the trade structure, the chain structure of export, and then the second paper. Okay, the two papers are quite related, but the first one is looking at the structure of the trade, but the second looking at the trade in value added, and I think we have a very limited time, so I would like to have some questions from the floor first, and then both presenters will answer each of these questions. Okay. You have any comments or question to? Yes.
With respect to the middle income track, I wonder under this globalization era, along with the foreign investment that many countries are dependent on, will be the answer to walk across the middle income track. Because it seems that to upgrade the sophisticated export of any country, it can be done either by the local, economic agents or by foreign, investing agents. Now, in the country where foreign investment seems to play the very important role to stimulate export and growth, will that also imply that will help for the country to walk across the middle income track. You see, because you mentioned something about the value added, it seemed to me that Thailand is a very good example that since 80s, Thailand, has pursued so-called export-oriented growth. But the export growth has not come from our own effort and know-how, but come from foreign agents. So I wonder this question of globalization and direct foreign investment could really help the country to walk across the middle income track. Thank you.
Ask the question or the answer.
Yes, my questions are along the same lines as my colleague. I think a lot of the data that you presented is fairly well known. We sort of understand this. We've seen this before. And so I think it's really the implications of all this. So one is, as my colleague says, is the problem fundamentally that it's so much of the industrialization is driven by foreign direct investment in Southeast Asia? Is that the problem? And related to that problem, what we have now is we certainly have governments like Thailand has always encouraged foreign direct investment. That what they're trying to do now is trying to encourage higher level foreign direct investment, right? More sophisticated, the S-curve industries, the industry 4.0. Is that the way to go? Is that possible? And finally, are we really talking here? If it's true as we say that the domestic companies are not innovating, it's the foreign companies that are bringing the investment. Is this really all a question about industrial policy? That we need to think about what is the appropriate industrial policy to get these countries to innovate. Thank you.
So my question is for the first paper. I think the equations or the methodology that we use to measure the sophistications is come from the Hosman 2007. But I think the disadvantage of the Hosman 2007 is do not measure the diversifications of the country according to the RCA, right? And I think Kuroiwa and Hosman 2009 have the new measures to measure sophistication with two things. One is diversifications according to the RCA, and the second one is to measure whether such a product has been exported by many countries or not. I'm not quite sure if you change the methodologies, results will change or not. I'm not quite sure that you have tried the new methodologies of Kuroiwa or not. And the second one, I thought that when you talk about the sophistications, you look only the sophistications in terms of the value of the products. But to some certain extent, if you have the process innovations, the price of the country might decline, and you still be able to keep the export share of your country good in the world market. I'm not quite sure that you look into this aspect in your research or not. About the process innovations, right? Not only the yes that make the price decline, and have you take into account this aspect in your research? Only two questions.
Thank you. For the first paper, I have one question for each. For the first paper, I think that the sophistication index we use is under the implicit assumption that we are producing finished product. But if you think about, as you already mentioned, it's about global production network, Kimura Sensei kind of story. The product from one country go to another country along the supply chain. So if you use the export destination GDP per capita as a measure,
It means if you are on the upstream industry, if you are the upstream in the value chain, you have to send the product to the lower income country to do the assembly. It means your product sophistication is going down. Is it reflecting the actual story that we are living here? Because if you're looking at the export growth in the region year by year, it's up and down together for the past 10 years. It means we are very deeply integrated in the global production network. So export destination is not freely determined by country. It depends on how deep that you involve in the production network. This is my concerns about the measurements. For the second paper, I think that it's very difficult to define high tech in the global production network, right? Because Horstman-Roddick kind of story is talking about the technical sophistication, but when it comes up to the trade, it's different because of how different harmonize doesn't mean different level of technological sophistication, right? So that could be the shortcoming on take that theoretical model to the empirical model as well. So like talking as you already mentioned about the iPhone, right? iPhone itself, it can be high tech if you think the whole the technical part, but if you think the production sent to China to assembly by Stockholm, it's not going to be a high tech, right? And in addition, you use I think that this is a global I/O table, OECD kind of thing. The level of this application is very limited. For example, food and beverage, they lump it together. So the value-added data that you use here might be have some shortcoming to be drawn inference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the many questions. I'm not sure I can answer to all the questions properly, but I try to do that. And first of all, that you hear about the middle income trap, you will imagine that you cannot progress beyond the middle income stage and or long-term trap in the middle income stage. But it's kind of the deep trap. It's typical in Latin American countries. But we saw that the middle income trap in this region is not that deep trap, that shallow trap. That means we can upgrade someday to the higher income stage. But there's a variation of high income countries from Northern Europe, so the 70,000 US dollar per capita to the just 20,000 US dollar per capita. So we thought in this region or Southeast Asia, if the region do not do any drastic change in pushing toward a more innovation strategy, maybe this region's country may start to be maybe around 20,000 to 30,000, not 70,000. That is a shallow middle income trap in this region, we thought. And this region, depending on the FDI, and I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there's two kinds of the industrial structure, industrial strategy, industrial policy. It's again say the deep industrialization and shallow industrialization. And and I think it's relatively easy to pursue the shallow industrialization by utilizing the foreign direct investment, FDI, and shallow industrialization. This one is always adapted by this region, Southeast Asia. And again, other is homegrown M&A sheets and in-house technology, so deep industrialization. And northeastern countries pursue this direction of the industrialization. So this one is relatively easy, but limited to the maybe the goal is 30,000 US dollar per capita. And this one maybe if succeeded, maybe 50,000 US dollar per capita. So this one easy, but the goal is a little bit lower. This one much difficult, but the goal is much higher. And it depends on which strategy you take. It depends on the situation in the each countries. If your country is very large and you have a lot of human resources, you can pursue this direction. But if your market is small and accumulation of the human capital is not very large, maybe this strategy is good. One failure is a case of the Malaysian automotive industry. It's a Proton. Malaysia pursued this direction by setting up the Proton-owned national automotive maker, but failed. As a result, Malaysia is very much backward automotive sector compared with Thailand. So very high risk if you don't have enough resources to pursue this industry policy. So we cannot say which one is better. It depends on the country, and you need to think about your situation in your country. And also, okay. But Industry 4.0 is a way to go. Even the industry is controlled by these MNCs. The step by step, your country needs to upgrade. So Industry 4.0 is a way to go, I think. And the product and export is not considered a diversification or of the product. Yes, I agree with that, and we need to do this kind of analysis also for the Southeast Asian country and East Asian country to see the difference. We didn't do this study, not yet, so we cannot ask the question. So, but we try to do that in the future. And also product is for the final product. So that now the world is fragmented, like Kimura-sensei said. So it's not easy to capture the true structure of the industrial network by the product. It's true. Yeah. So the Dr. Kuroiwa is using the in that input-output table. So our research is very much complement each other. And
to calculate the product, we don't use the GDP of importing country, but the exporting country. You know. So even though because of the GDP, the developed countries are exporting a lot of people to developing countries, but in calculating the product, we use the GDP of exporting country, high-income country, instead of the importing country. So product becomes higher, even though we have the GDP. You know what I mean?
You use the
The
exporting.
GDP of exporting country, not the importing country.
So it's going to be the same all the product. From let's say Japan export to Vietnam.
Same.
You say Japan.
Yeah,
So
same. Regardless of the importing country, because Japan is exporting, so you use the GDP of Japan. GDP per capita of Japan.
and so how can it? Let's talk later, but I still a bit confused about it.
And okay, talk about the process innovation and product innovation. In case of Penang in Malaysia, it's very much a strict demarcation of the USA and Penang. US company is doing the R&D for the product innovation here in US, and Penang is concentrated more on the process innovation. So but Penang or Malaysia to be high-income countries, I think that this product innovation, so increasing the product value or price is needed. Only a process innovation, it leads to tougher competition with the others. So I think it's necessary, and in short run, process innovation also increase the competitiveness of the Penang as a production base, but it's not enough to be a high-income country. Only the process innovation. So product innovation also needed to be a high-income country, I think.
Okay. For the global, maybe Kumagasan already answered many questions, and I'd like to focus on these two development strategies. Why shallow industrialization is different from the deep industrialization? Why the economic performance is so different between these two strategies? The biggest reason is the accumulation of capabilities, technological capabilities. When you depend on FDI, most of the R&Ds are conducted in the home countries or multinational companies. In the case of Japan, most important FDI are conducted in Japan, not in Thailand. Right? So you use opportunities to accumulate knowledge and experience if you depend too much on the FDI. But in the home, in Korea and in Korea and Japan, we borrow the technology from abroad, from the Western countries, and we develop our technology by themselves. So a lot of knowledge and experience are accumulated in the Northeast Asian countries compared with Southeast Asian countries. That makes a big, significant difference. So in Japan, in Northeast Asia, a process of endogenous growth, something like endogenous growth process occurs in Northeast Asia. While in South Asia, they continue to depend on the technologies imported from abroad. So that kind of difference, is important. And regarding the high definition of high-tech product, we use a definition of the OECD. And as you mentioned, China's iPhone export is overestimated because it's just a simple assembly process. But if we use predictors, overestimation cannot be avoided. But if we use a trading barrier, it can be avoided because the value added generated in China for assembling activities is very small compared with the value of imported inputs. So a lot of value added generated in other countries like Japan. So we should use the trading barriers instead of the trade data.
Okay, for the multinational companies, they tend to do the most advanced R&D in their home country. So in case of Toyota, doing all the research regarding to the top technology and the product innovation is done in Japan. So, but yes, in Toyota has a regional R&D center here. But it's all about the modification of the base design and using the already developed technology. And also here some process innovation. This R&D is a mid-level innovation. And then maybe Cambodia and Indonesia just doing the production. So here's a low income, and this is the middle for the middle income. and this is a high income. So just some R&D means everything, but just very high level R&D and mid level R&D. And if you want to be a true high income country, you need this part of the top level high R&D. But Toyota never moved this top level R&D into Thailand because they need to keep their headquarters in Japan. If they move this top level R&D into Thailand, Toyota will be a Thailand company, just nothing to do in Japan. So that every MNC want to keep their top level R&D in their home country. So if you, Thailand, want to be a truly high level, high income country like Japan, you also need your own homegrown MNCs to do this kind of top level R&D in Thailand.
Thank you. I think we will have
Okay, thank you. I think we will have some more discussion after this, maybe at the lunch. Okay, so I think if you have further questions, we will meet at room 403. Okay. So thank you very much for both presenter, and we will give some of the souvenir from my faculty. Let me ask my supervisor, academic supervisor, Dr. Thammasat, to give this to both of you.